watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and on this Friday evening, we're going to look at a couple of very interesting aspects as we track maybe the biggest story of our times, the COVID-19 and its impact on the globe, on this country and on each one of us. So here's the latest. We've had the highest number of jumps in cases in 24 hours. In the last 24 hours at 478 cases. Our total number is above 2,500 right now with 62 deaths. Meanwhile, we are going to continue to talk about what happens next. Our best case scenario is that everyone follows this social distancing and we can corner the hot spots where the contamination of COVID-19 have spread. But what about the economy after that? What about the complete freeze in several sectors? I'm going to be joined in just a couple of minutes from now by Arvind Panagariya, top economist and in fact the first vice chairman of the Niti Aayog. But I'm also going to talk ahead on the show on the pay cuts. They've begun. Government has said, please don't cut pay, but they have begun. We've seen that in aviation, we've seen that in several sectors. In big companies, we don't even know what's happening in smaller, informal sector companies right now. What is going to be the impact of those pay cuts? Could your sector be hit? All of that coming up. But first, I want to welcome Arvind Panagariya. Thank you so much, Mr. Panagariya, for speaking with us today on ET Now. I want to begin by asking if you're doing fine. You're joining us from New York, where there seems to be a mess. They've just crossed over 1 lakh cases.
Yes, indeed, Tamanna. I think, New York state has been the most affected within the United States. The United States is the most affected country today in terms of number of cases. And within New York State, New York City is almost half of the New York State cases. So very badly impacted. I am in day 25 of my own kind of voluntary lockdown in the apartment with my wife here. So we are doing fine. We got our supplies, the usual, dal, roti and chawal. So we are able to pull it off. We are keeping our humor intact.
Yeah. Well, stay safe, and maybe we should have a separate conversation of how you've dealt with 25 days of lockdown. We're looking at about 10 to 14 here in India, depending on when people went into self-isolation. But let's come to the big question. So India has clocked about 2,500 cases right now. The US, of course, largest number of cases. And while many are feeling relieved that the cases are relatively so few in India, the question is, are these numbers actually representing the true picture?
Right. So, this is where I think the number of deaths come in handy. That is a number which is reliable. That is a number we can see in real time. And I would say that even the number of deaths indicate to me that India has been less affected. To that, I think we should also add the important fact that India is a very, very large country, 1.3 billion people. And therefore, we should also look at this at the state level. So clearly, the states of Maharashtra, Kerala, Karnataka, Delhi, these have been affected much more. But, if you go down to several of the other states, Bihar, Orissa, smaller ones, Goa, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. These are states which have been very little impacted. In some states we have got cases only in single digits. So a lot of, while the focus naturally has to be on the states where the cases are very many, it sometimes hides the fact that very large parts of India are doing okay, they are safe, which is not a reason for complacency. That's not what I want to encourage. But certainly, we can take some optimism in the fact that a very large number of our states and people are relatively safe from this menace.
Well, that's those are the figures right now, but the question is for how long. I want to come to the question of the lockdown really, and the lockdown was being talked about from quite some time across the rest of the world. India was ahead of the curve, and we're being praised. Maybe that's why we've limited our numbers. But it has also come with its own impact and pretty severe repercussions for a whole host of people, for migrant workers, for companies, for supply chains, etc. Do you think that we can economically, quote unquote, survive an extension of the current lockdown, and for how long?
Yeah, no, I have absolutely no doubt in the resilience of India. We have come out of very significant poverty, and the prosperity we see around here is relatively new. So we know how to deal with adversity. And thankfully now, with the growth that we have had in the last 20 years, we do have some social safety nets, and we also have some resources. The government is not the ability of the government to deal with poverty and difficulties and specific groups that get impacted heavily today is a lot better than it was 30 years ago. So I'm quite convinced that we can overcome all the hurdles, and people are cooperating. People do realize that this is for the good of everyone, and if there is need seen for extending the lockdown by week, 2 weeks, perhaps even by 3 weeks, that is a call, of course, Prime Minister and his advisors will have to take. But I think we can do it. The trick is to what I think some of it the government has already done, because the most important thing is shelter and food. And it seems to me that the government has, and particularly I think the state governments have pitched in a big way. So it's partly a matter of resources, but partly also a matter of organization and management. And we had some difficulty with the migrant workers and all, but I think the government managed to move in quickly, open vast numbers of shelters in areas where the migrants had come out in such large numbers, and they have been now sheltered and being provided food. I think those are the two most important things. And then one can begin to think in terms of also cash transfers, which were a part of the original package that the finance minister announced, but one can go further.
Yeah. I also want to talk about what is going to happen to India post COVID-19. What does the world and India and the world economy and India's economy look like? There's a report by Fitch today which says that we could clock here in India, a GDP growth rate of 2% in FY21. Do you think it will be that harsh? And what does a 2% growth rate, the lowest in 30 years, really look like in a country like India? What does that mean?
Well, Tamanna, you see, there is a lot of uncertainty right now as to how the phasing out of the lockdown will play out, how the external trade will be opened, how the flights and transportation, etc., will be opened. So today, because everything is closed down, it looks overly pessimistic. I am not that. I really think that we did overcome the 2008 global financial crisis and came out of it relatively unscathed, and started clocking back 8 to 9% growth in those years. And I have no doubt we'll come out of this one as well. We will have greater clarity, whether it ends up being 2% or it actually ends up being 7-8%. Nothing is ruled out here. It is all going to depend on, how fast we are able to flatten out the corona curve. So we should have greater clarity in another 3 to 4 weeks, I would say. But if we do that, I think what we need to do, personally, what we really need to do is to prepare for post-lockdown.
Scenario, do you see 7 to 8%?
Well, look, if after 2008, if you had asked somebody, would they have said that 2009-10 will end up being 8% plus? Nobody was predicting that in those days, but those are the numbers we have. So I'm just, being an optimist. I don't rule that out. Just as I can't rule out the 2% that Fitch has predicted, which can also happen. I'm not ruling out, getting to 7% or so, and certainly not in the second half of FY21. Because also the past experience shows that even though it looks like, the supply chains have been disrupted and how are we going to get out of it, supply chains do rebuild themselves very quickly. And human spirit is absolutely paramount.
Yes.
People rise up.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. But let me talk about specific sectors and how, the world post-lockdown and post-COVID-19 is going to look right here in India. Sectors like tourism, aviation, your hotel industry, those which depend on discretionary spending, do you see a longer and larger hit there? Because these businesses have already started to feel the pain and have sort of passed it down in terms of either job cuts or job losses.
Yes. You are absolutely right. These are the sectors that are most impacted, and airlines particularly. We don't mention railways, but I'm sure railways has been hit very hard also. Anything that carries passengers, I think that is going to be perhaps a slightly longer term lockdown also. So those sectors certainly will remain more impacted. And tourism does take time to come back to life. But at the same time, we also have all the corporations in IT sector, in pharmaceuticals, etc., are sitting on a lot of cash. If the financial markets are kept alive, which is really the responsibility, something for the RBI to do, then a lot of the other sectors can come up very rapidly. And I think, the sectors such as FMCG, etc., they can be fueled by the government transfers to people. I think, I also think, for example, I'll tell you one example, the Narega money, for instance, that is solid 45,000 crore rupees, which is available. And that can be converted, through an ordinance or something, temporarily, at least for a year or so, into cash transfers. You can take maybe the average number of days worked by a particular worker in the last, let's say, 2 years. And in that proportion, then you can transfer that Narega money automatically to people. That's the money that's already allocated for expenditure. And that's a money that can be passed on rapidly.
Yes.
It'll require, as I said, a legislative change, but that can be done through an ordinance. So that's a sort of creative thing we need to do. And then, of course, we need to invest heavily. This is a point noted by many in the health sector, because we need to build up our defenses. We need
Yes.
very large supply of, I think in the post-lockdown, we are going to need very, very large supply of the masks. I think, if the masks are available, and to me, it seems that, we should even encourage people to make their own multiple layered masks. Because, if everybody wears a mask, then we practically eliminate the risk of passing on the contagion. Because, if the person who is going to give infection, person who is going to get infection, both have the mask on them, the probability really drops to very, very low. So I think that's one thing we need. And indeed, if we can collect enough supply of masks, we should mandate it that, like like the Czech Republic did, and within 5 days, they, eliminated all infection, spread of infection further. So if everybody wears a mask, for instance, then this is common in places like Taiwan, South Korea, etc. That could go a long way.
Okay, I just want to quickly ask you about the government's response. Now, the government's response in terms of the lockdown has been appreciated. We've been ahead of the curve, and clearly what the pain the United States is suffering very sadly, but truly highlights the fact that, we've been good on that. What about in terms of supporting businesses? Some businesses have diverted and innovated to try and feed the current demand, whether it's making ventilators or masks or sanitizers. But there are whole parts of this economy right now which are on pause mode and are bleeding at the same time. The government's priority, rightly so, seems to be the medical one. But can we keep the economic package and support off till too late?
Okay, so first let me say that our response to Corona, I think that has been absolutely phenomenal. Whatever any critics might say, actually, the truth of the matter is that I did not anticipate the government really getting its act together in the way it has successfully done so. I think, for example, tracing of thousands of these cases that got discovered recently in Delhi, originating in Delhi, phenomenal. The way they have all come together in so many different states, they are spread out and all. I think the government deserves huge applause for that, huge credit for it. So that's one. Now on the economic package side, certainly first of all, very important that the RBI ensures that the cash flow continues and that is uninterrupted. So RBI has a huge role to play there. The finance has to be available to MSMEs, as well as the corporations. Very, very important there. Also, any generalized incentives for investment that can be given, for example, temporary holiday on the long-term capital gains tax, that sort of thing, whatever other investment oriented kind of incentives that can be given, which are generalized rather than specific sectors. That is good because some sectors like IT, pharmaceuticals, etc., have been sitting on a lot of cash that can be quickly converted into investment. Now, for the specific sectors, I think there is going to be a little tough going, which is construction. By the way, once we get down to it, phasing out the lockdown.
Yeah.
Construction is another area where I think some targeted action may be taken, and for the tourism, I think there's going to be tough going, and so government should perhaps find ways. I think we also, by the way, going forward, need to build up some information base on the informal workers, also the migrant workers, so that in situations like this, right now, for example. Whereas in rural areas we have a lot of good access, the farmers, etc. We have them under Aadhaar and Jan Dhan accounts. But
right.
For a lot of the migrant workers, we had no Jan Dhan accounts. We didn't have a database. So that needs to be created also for the future. Yeah. So that in situations like this, you can also get some cash transfer.
Clearly, yes.
So those are the steps.
We are
for tourism, etc.,
different and diverse kind of an economy.
Right. Now, I think gradually we'll be opening perhaps also our international borders and allowing the flights to be coming in. I've heard the aviation minister Hardeep Puri talk about beginning, opening up the flights and so forth. I think now, this is one thing we didn't do as well in the first round. Now we have to be careful, as passengers come in from outside. We ought to actually, arrange to test them before they are released actually into the general population. Frankly, in the previous round, we did allow many to actually, because this self quarantine seems not to have worked. There were quite a few cases one heard where people did not self quarantine and sort of went off on trains.
It doesn't work, and it was a bit hazy. Our timeline was also a bit hazy, but when we let people in and not. So much more to chat about. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Always a pleasure.
Likewise, Tamanna. My pleasure too. Thank you for having me.
Yes, always a pleasure. Arvind Panagariya. Take care, stay safe, and we'll touch base soon.
Stay safe.
Arvind Panagariya there, talking about.
Want to say is that you are doing the tougher job there.
Yes, no, I'm at home as well. This is work from home.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah,
that's good.
You can't see me, but I'm working from home as well. We're isolating as well. But thank you. Pleasure speaking with you once again.